Here we go. Welcome, Rhian, to the podcast.
Hello.
Just as you were taking a drink then. Rhian, how are you doing?
Great, thank you. Both kids are asleep, so it's a nice quiet hour of the day.
Oh, perfect. I caught you at a good time then. Rhian, do you want to just give yourself a little bit of an introduction to the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Rhian. I'm a mum of two. I have a little girl called Sarah and she's 2.5. And I have a little boy who's 4.5 months old called Samson. I'm a prenatal tutor for Body Hack. I'm a prenatal coach. And I'm currently studying to finish my doula certification. I've been in the fitness industry now for about 18 years. And I have a huge passion for helping women stay fit and healthy through pregnancy. And helping them with postpartum recovery to become a fit and strong mum.
Oh, that's awesome. Great introduction as well. And I guess what I want to ask is, so obviously you've been in the fitness industry for such a long time. So I guess, did your transition start from kind of, being a personal trainer, being in the fitness industry, and then you gradually got to the position where you are now, maybe through, you having children and that type of stuff?
Yeah, a couple of years before I started having children, I started getting really passionate about, fit and healthy pregnancies. I first started, training the average Jane. Then I went on to training physique athletes, and then high performance athletes, and then more local Arabic clients. And now I've moved into pre and postnatal field, which I absolutely love. So.
Yeah, and I always think that's great. And I was speaking to, Ross was on the podcast not long ago. I know you know Ross as well. And we were talking about, because he's, he's been on all these different avenues of, different styles of training and stuff, that he's really homed in on what his kind of niche is now. And I think it's great. Someone, like you've done as well. You've been in different, you've worked with high level athletes, you've worked with different clientele, and now you found that this is what you probably enjoy doing, and this is what you want to do as well. Before we go into this, people are probably thinking, why is Joff doing a podcast on Coffee with Joffy on pregnancy and pre and postnatal and stuff like that? But the truth is, I don't know a lot about it. And one of the things that this podcast is great for is that I get to listen and take things in. And I just found that I'm learning so much through doing it. A lot of the people that I train and a lot of my clients that I deal with are females who have children, or people that are, maybe have had children, or they're going to have children. So I think as a professional, it's up to me to, learn the basic understanding. And Einstein has a famous quote, I think it's something like, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, then you don't know what it is. So I've taken that quite literally. So this is your platform to teach me, and obviously you can talk to the listeners as well. So let's jump into it. Just nice and kind of general, how important is exercise during pregnancy, both pre and post?
So prenatally, it's important for the health of you as a mum and for the baby. So here in the UAE, for instance, gestational diabetes is quite common. So things like keeping a fit and healthy pregnancy will lower that risk. Exercise will control your blood sugar. It means less unnecessary weight gain. It means less aches and pains. It means staying strong for motherhood, staying aerobically fit, and having that increase of circulation that can help with things that you may experience during your pregnancy: cramping, swelling, varicose veins, help with placenta health, delivering nutrients to the baby. It can also help prepare you for labor and delivery, which everyone wants a quicker and faster labor. Staying strong around the birth canal, keeping a strong core, strong pelvic floor can all help you when it comes to labor and birth as well. Postnatally, keeping fit and healthy again is key in terms of rehabilitating your body, reconnecting your abdominal muscles, which I'm sure we'll go into a little bit further on. Promoting neutral alignment again and getting a strong posture back, and then gradually and progressively becoming a fit and strong mum again. So there are so many benefits. Actually, the 3/4 of pregnant women actually don't get the recommended amount of exercise, which is 5 times 30 minutes a week. So my passion is to change that, by promoting all these benefits, and helping women feel a lot better during their pregnancy as well.
I just listening to you list all of them off then, and it was impressive. And I guess it's the same as, you know, me trying to promote someone to exercise as well. You go like, what are the benefits of exercising generally? And you could just list off, you know, 10, hundreds of different points. And it sounds like it's exactly the same for pregnancy as well. Is it, you know, how much different is your training for, I know this is quite a general statement, but someone who is already training versus maybe someone's not training as much? Let's go with that person. The person who's maybe not training as much before their pregnancy, getting into some sort of training, what does that look like?
Well, first of all, there's, you know, some people think if I haven't exercised before, maybe I can't exercise during pregnancy, but there's no better time to start. So, you know, just like if we weren't pregnant, we want to start gradually and progressively, and we want to protect ourselves and make sure we're safe. So things like walking and swimming can be done without instruction, without, you know, supervision. But again, you want to be progressive and gradual. So you may want to start with 2 or 3 times of 15 minutes of walking or swimming per week, and then maybe every 2 weeks add maybe 2 minutes on. There are precautions that you need to take through the trimesters. Prenatal classes are always very safe and supportive environments. So the instructor will be qualified enough to modify exercises depending on which trimester you're at and which stage of the pregnancy. When it comes to body weight training and resistance training, that's when we need to be a little bit more cautious, and a pre and postnatal trainer is, you know, is recommended. So things like after the first trimester, we want to be avoiding flexing the spine. So any crunch like motion. So things like getting up from bed, we want to do things like log roll out to the side. So go down onto the exercise mat on our sides, come up off the side. As the uterus grows and your bump grows, your baby grows, the abdominal muscles start to separate. The connective tissue in between, like the six-pack muscles, rectus abdominis, starts to stretch. And this gap in between can be worsened through flexing the spine. So we want to avoid that. There's a hormone called Relaxity. Sorry, go on. What was you going to say? Were you going to ask something on that topic?
No, carry on. No, carry on. Oh. Like I said, I'll shoot some questions over after. You're good. Keep going.
Okay. Things like joint laxity. So when you're pregnant, your joints are a little bit more lax because of the relaxing hormone. So you want to make sure you have a longer warm up and a longer cool down as opposed to someone who's not pregnant. And be careful when it comes to things like stretching. Holding stretches too long, going deep into stretches, any advanced complicated stretches like doing the splits or frog stretches, you want to avoid things like that. Lying on your back during pregnancy, after say week 16, you want to be a bit more cautious because, you know, the size on the bump is increasing, the weight is increasing, and that weight can put pressure on the vena cava, the largest vein in the body, which can make you a little bit dizzy. So thinking of alternative exercises to lying down flat, like incline dumbbell press instead of flat, stretch your kneeling or standing instead of on the mat. You want to be cautious of that. The intensity of exercise, as opposed to not being pregnant, you want to keep, say on a scale of 1 to 10, you want to keep it around, say, a 5 or a 6, or a moderate intensity. The talk test is a great indicator. So, you know, if you're able to talk during your exercise, you know that the intensity is generally okay.
Yes, that's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you. So let's flip it on the other side. The first person I said was maybe someone who's not exercised before. What about that person who, and you know, you see videos of it all over the internet, like, you know, pregnant ladies who are already like CrossFit athletes and that type of stuff, training still quite heavily through their pregnancy. You know, you've listed all those things that they need to consider then. And it was interesting you just said about the training intensity. Is there kind of like an area in terms of it's personal to you in terms of like what levels you can hit? Because I'm sure someone who's, you know, training 5-6 days a week at a real high intensity, that kind of change, obviously their aims and goals are going to change through being pregnant, but it might be a hard pill to swallow, you know, letting your intensity drop.
Yeah, it is a personal thing. And the truth is, there's not much research gone into taking your heart rate that high. I mean, short bursts of high heart rates could be safe, but maintaining that high heart rate could bring some risks. And the truth is there's not enough research gone into it. The scale of the intensity, it used to be based on heart rate. Don't take your heart rate above 140. But now it's based on the RPE scale, rate of perceived exertion. It means that, one woman may hit a 6 out of 10 with a heart rate of 120, but another woman could be at a heart rate of 165 and have an intensity of 6 out of 10. So it's a lot more personal. It's a lot more of a realistic scale. In terms of social media and people still, CrossFit athletes, etc. Athletes have come to me after the pregnancy with very severe diastasis recti because of the big intra-abdominal pressure that they are experiencing during heavy lifting and having to have surgery. So this is why I don't like some of the things I see on social media, because I'm thinking, obviously they're going to suffer consequences afterwards, and it's encouraging people to do the same. So in terms of heavy lifting, you want to, maybe stay below 70% of your 1 rep max to keep things safe.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. And I think even just one of the first points that you said about, log rolling out of bed and crunching, and just you actually, I didn't realize how much of an effect that can have, not necessarily like an instant effect on your pregnancy, but what that can do after. And I think, like, listening to you speak now, that you have a good broad range of examples, maybe clients that you've worked with in the past, and knowing what their training history is, knowing what their training regime was through their pregnancy. Is it kind of like you learn through seeing different ways of doing things? Because there's no one size fits all, right?
Exactly. Every woman's pregnancy journey is different, and every consecutive pregnancy is different as well. Like, my pregnancies have been completely different. But one thing I want to say about the athletes as well is that, if you are used to doing something, so I may not encourage someone to keep doing the splits through pregnancy, yet it is something that their body is conditioned to doing. They may feel comfortable doing it all through the trimesters. You may see an athlete maybe squatting 120 kilos, but pre-pregnancy, she was lifting 200 kilos.
Yeah.
So she has significantly dropped her weight, which some people don't realize. Some people see me lifting, deadlifting, say 80 or 90 kilos, but the truth is that's quite a significant drop for me. I'm not, staying at my 1 rep max. I've significantly dropped my weight.
Yeah, I guess what's quite obvious from this is just going out and speaking to people like yourself and getting advice and through your pregnancy as well. So I guess that leads me on to the importance of working with a trainer. Now, I don't necessarily mean going and working one-to-one, but getting advice. Getting advice from someone who is qualified as postnatal, because I don't know, I might be throwing wood into the fire now in terms of like, you might see this more than I do, but people that are pregnant who get into that side of training and get into that, maybe they're a personal trainer before they have their own children. There's nothing wrong with this as long as they're doing it safely. Do you see a lot of people kind of getting into your area? I think you know what I'm getting at here, getting into your area who aren't necessarily qualified. How important is it to have that background, those separate qualifications?
I mean, you want to protect yourself. So I think the first thing to do is to make sure that you have the doctors go ahead to work out, to make sure that there's no complications, and that, it's a low risk pregnancy or postpartum, that it hasn't been any complications since the birth. Secondly, for a trainer, I would definitely make sure you have a modified PARCU so that you know the history of the client in terms of previous pregnancies, current pregnancies, a doctor's signature to say that, if the lady had a C-section or, multiple birth or any complications, that the doctor signed you off and you're able to exercise. But every trimester and postpartum brings its own symptoms and experiences. So to have this education behind you can help you modify things, adapt things, and stay safe, and also be confident training your client, or for you to, be confident training yourself. So, I mean, the body can respond in different ways. Yeah, it's completely dependent, and that's why there's no black or white.
Yeah,
There's so many gray areas.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, because I could have, and I've had this plenty of times before, you know, maybe someone that I'm training, their wife just had a baby. Can I potentially go and train someone? And me as a trainer, the experience I've got, you know, I've been doing it a long time as well. Like, I'm fairly sure that I can modify and scale exercises as and when needed. But I don't necessarily know what the knock-on effect is that is going to be. And I guess that's the point that I was getting to. Someone like yourself knows, you know, the risk of someone who's crunching during their pregnancy a lot, or, you know, like we discussed before, versus someone who isn't, the ramifications of what happens there.
Yeah, I mean, so postpartum, you want to, you know, your client, you want to make sure that the abdominals have healed back together before doing things like circuit training or anything that really increases the abdominal pressure, like the crunches, or even things like pull-ups or heavy squats, or even dips or planks. You know, they increase the abdominal pressure as well. Things like the pelvic floor, so things like you want to avoid impact until the pelvic floor is strong enough to be able to do those movements. Joint laxity, so the relaxin hormone I mentioned stays high up to 10 weeks after giving birth. So this means that the joints are a little bit more lax still, which means you're more prone to injury. So you want to be, you know, like I said, longer warm up, longer cool down, avoid really pressurizing those joints in certain movements and through stretching and, you know, things like that. And also going more gradually and progressively with the weight increase as well.
Yeah, so almost having, once you're getting back into training, you've been given the go-ahead to almost having your own kind of like routine or regime that you go through before you go in. And even not necessarily a circuit class, but even just like a strength and conditioning class, you still have your modify exercises in there, but you've taken the time, maybe 20 or 30 minutes to kind of prime your body ready to go and do that as well. I just want to go down talking about, like, we've talked quite a lot about the physical side of it, and I'm sure there's plenty more as well. But, you know, postnatal, what about the mental side of it? What do you see working with your clientele? Let me just give you an example. Like I said before, I work with a lot of females, and, you know, the conversation sometimes revolves around social media and, you know, looking at young 21-year-old girls who are doing booty band workouts in, you know, amazing shape. And it's kind of like painting a false image of what people can get to. Do you find that a lot as well?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I would encourage women to, you know, ignore that message that the media is portraying, that you know, you can bounce back in 6 weeks postpartum, and, you know, motherhood is such an extraordinary, amazing journey, but there are plenty of challenges that come with it. It's hard. It's really hard, you know, being a mother, taking care of your children, being a wife, taking care of your household, still focusing on your career, and it can get quite overwhelming and exhausting. So it is important that we don't compare. And you know, some women do bounce back quick, but they are in the minority. And the truth is it's safer, you know, to go back to our pre-pregnancy shape slower, so that it's more achievable, more maintainable. And also it just gives us chance to be ready, you know, not rush back, take time with our kids and get into routine and get into patterns of, you know, sleeping and eating, you know, the baby's routine. And it's a time to embrace motherhood and also be patient and kind to ourselves, and trust our body that, you know, just as our body miraculously changed to accommodate our baby growing inside of us, trust that our body will go back to how it was before. And it's a time for lots of self-compassion, and it's a time for patience and just taking small steps, you know, back to where we used to be, small steps forward in terms of not thinking about weight loss, but thinking of becoming more active, and not thinking about dieting, but thinking about eating nourishing and healthy foods, you know, having that different approach. But it's tough. It's really tough being a mum and finding time to schedule things like exercise, or, making sure that you eat well, because your priorities have changed. Your ultimate priority is looking after your children, and you almost become last. So it takes time to realize that, what, exercise and looking after my health does actually need to be a priority, so that I can be better for, everyone else.
No, I think you summed it up perfectly there, and I'm sure so many people who listen to this and can completely relate to that as well. Let's how much emphasis do you put on, obviously we know exercise, the benefits and stuff. How much emphasis do you put on like non-exercise activity? Is that a big kind of component once someone's pregnant or postnatal? Is that something that you talk about? Going for walks with the baby and stuff like that?
Absolutely. I mean, in the first stages of postpartum recovery, there's two things that you maybe encourage yourself to do: your pelvic floor exercises and walking outside in the fresh air with your baby, clearing your head, getting that exercise in, but nothing that's too strenuous for your body if it's not ready. It takes around 6 weeks, for you to get that go ahead, for you to move on to more strenuous exercises. So you can do gentle exercises like mobilizing your joints, some abdominal connection breathing, or some glute activation. But you want to keep things gentle. But those particular things can promote healing and can help relieve aches and pains postpartum as well. But before moving on to any of the strenuous stuff, make sure you have the go ahead, make sure your abdominals are healed back together, make sure your pelvic floor is strong enough, and you're not forcing yourself out the door, that you're ready to take those next steps.
Can we go into pelvic floor a little bit more, and in particular just some like most people will probably understand what that means, but I want to get like more of a practical example of that. Like maybe just give us 2 or 3 exercises that are really going to help benefit improving the pelvic floor.
Okay, so pelvic floor contractions can be done brushing your teeth. Okay, so usually doing your pelvic floor contractions, no one can tell that you're doing them. So when you find out you're pregnant, that's when you want to start doing your pelvic floor exercises. When you've given birth, you're able to straight away start doing your pelvic floor exercises. It used to be when you finish bleeding, but now they say that you can do them straight away. So contracting and relaxing our pelvic floor is key. We want to do fast pelvic floor contractions and slow pelvic floor contractions. So for instance, the fast ones, squeeze, relax, are enable us to help us catch a sneeze, without losing bladder control. And then you've got the endurance and the hold. So the slow, so the hold for 6 counts, relax for 6 counts. They can help with like labor. And then postpartum, you want to also do endurance and holds for lifelong health with your pelvic floor. So a lot of women may not even be able to connect with a pelvic floor. So that's when, if you're pre and postnatal qualified, that's when you can help use visualization techniques to help your client connect with a pelvic floor before focusing on strengthening, relaxing, and lengthening the pelvic floor.
It's almost
one of
like
the most important things you.
Yeah, go on. Sorry, carry on.
Lost my trail of thought. Go on.
I was going to say that's obviously working with someone like yourself. Like your job is someone who doesn't know about pelvic floor and how to contract, relax, that type of stuff. That can almost be like a foreign language to someone, and you're almost like the person who can translate. And not everybody is basic teaching, right? Not everybody responds to the same cue of how to do things. So then that might be a way that you can help people to kind of learn those skills that they need that are ultimately very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that with male coaches, even when they pre and postnatal qualified, which my husband is, there's only so much they can understand in terms of the pelvic floor because, things are differently. But absolutely. I mean, it's actually more common that we realize pelvic floor dysfunction. and it's not talked about enough. But it's there's so many different apps that we can use now, you know, to follow, that will send you notifications as reminder, but also have intervals that you can follow that do the counts, the bleeps, so that you can follow in terms of, you know, contracting, relaxing, and lengthening your pelvic floor as well. So there's various different apps. My favorite is PFEI, which is easy to follow, and it will remind you 3 times a day. It will go through the different intervals, and it will also progress you through the intervals so that they gradually become harder and harder. So, you know, the time you get to your 3rd trimester, your pelvic floor health is a lot better than when you started with.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that builds into one of the things that I talk a lot about the habit loop, and just having that application of reminding you that visual or tactile cue to go and do that. Obviously, consistent habits will build to, you know, the end goal that you're trying to get to. This has been awesome. I've got a question from a listener, but before we go through that, and the reason that I'm bringing this one up now, because they asked me and I don't feel super comfortable answering it. And I thought this would be a perfect time to get an answer for it. So, and again, I'm learning. But just before we go into that, what does training look like? Someone's, you know, they've had a baby, they've followed their doctor's advice, they've worked with a trainer like yourself, or they've gone through their, you know, their early training after their pregnancy, and they're kind of in a position now. I don't know what time frame that might be, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. What does training look like then? Is it different to, you know, what I might promote for someone to do in terms of strength and conditioning?
So between 6 and 12 months, you're probably at a stage where you can go back to your pre-pregnancy routine. Okay, so I mean, I'm 5 months postpartum now, but I'm probably looking at another 2 months until I was back to where I was. I think being a mother means a lot more emphasis on our posterior chain. So especially like things like the upper back, just because things like we do a lot more carrying of our children. Or if you're nursing, I mean, here in the UAE, people nurse their babies up until 3 years of age. So, you know, they still have that, they still have increased weight on their anterior, which means their shoulders are rounded forward a little bit more, which means stiff mid backs. So between 6 and 12 months, you're still doing a lot of thoracic work, mid back strengthening, upper back strengthening, a lot more glute work, because of the posture changes during pregnancy. You get more of an arch in the lower back, a little bit more lordosis. When you've given birth, the opposite tends to happen, and that's what they call mum bum, you know, when you have your pelvis tucked under. So at this point, between 6 and 12 months, you still want to be looking at getting your body back into neutral alignment. So getting that strong posture back, working the glutes a little bit more than maybe you usually would, regaining that lean tissue that you may have lost as the muscles weaken through pregnancy, and probably more mobilization. Like I found that my hips are a lot more stiffer, as well as my thoracic, and my wrists also, again, because of the carrying. So a lot more mobilization on my hips, thoracic, and wrists, and feet, I would say, because commonly after pregnancy, because we lose sight of our feet because our bump gets so big, foot amnesia is quite common. So reconnecting to our feet, doing a lot more mobilization and connection and awareness work on our feet is also key, which again is often ignored, but is quite important with postpartum clients. But you know, some women, it takes up to 2 years to get back to where they were, and that's okay. You know, it's okay. Every woman's journey is different, and just be patient with yourself.
And like just those points that you went through then, and I just can't help but feel, and again, like I'm not talking as if it's fact, but I just can't help but feel, you know, people can't wait to get back to high intensity interval training and doing classes 4 times a week. There must be so much more benefit from adopting a healthy, you know, core posterior chain. And it doesn't even need to be stuff that you're going into the gym, that you can do at home. Adopting a simple 30-minute regime that you do maybe 2 or 3 times a week, as opposed to going and bashing out a high intensity interval training class, then the benefits must be like so much more from doing that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, for my clients that I'm training, I want to make sure that their body is bulletproof before they go on to doing, things that they may not have been ready for. So for instance, a pre-pregnancy routine or some Spartan races or, desert warrior decathlons, going back on the rugby pitch, wherever they may be, I want to make sure their body is bulletproof first.
Yeah, that's perfect. I like that answer. And I've got a name for the podcast now.
Yeah.
Rhian, I want to ask this question for you. So this is she's actually one of my members, but she messaged me. She was asking about tips for training and nutrition, like particularly cravings around, that time of the month, menstrual cycle, how things can fluctuate. I've just kind of reeled it off then. I'm just going to be like, hey, over to you.
Okay. Well, so just like pregnancy and postpartum, it's all about working with your body and not against it. So every woman's menstrual cycle is different, and every woman feels different during the menstrual cycle. So I would encourage women to, track their cycle. Some are short, some are long, and so there's plenty of apps that they can use to track their cycle, but also it's worth journaling in terms of how they feel during different points of the cycle, different phases of the cycle, how their body is changing in terms of bloating, swelling, aches and pains, how their training may differ through the phases. So, I mean, it's totally unique to, you as a woman, but I mean, typical phases you can use for your advantage. So for instance, the first day of your period up until ovulation is where your estrogen hormone is the highest. So this means you feel good. This means it's a great time for making strength gains, for gaining muscle tone. Your body is more efficient at recovering. Then you have ovulation, which is a great time for setting personal records. You have an influx of hormones, your testosterone rises high, you have a testosterone rise, great time for setting personal records. Then you have like that premenstrual period stage where, your body gets quite tired, you start getting little aches and pains, you don't recover as fast, you may be bloated, you may have cravings, and that's when you may want to lighten the load of your weights or be a little bit more gentle with your body, doing maybe body weight things instead, or focusing on, so with my clients, we may focus on like skills and techniques. So, balancing on the Swiss ball, hanging from the pull-up bar, doing the crow pose, things like that. That's not so strenuous on the body, but it's, you want to do it with what's in tune with your body and how your body responds. So being aware of those changes and when it's best for you to have rest days or to be a little bit more flexible on your diet in terms of craving. I mean, because during our period, our metabolic rate is higher. So we can be more flexible and, have an extra 200 calories per day, which will keep the cravings at bay. So it may not be a time for discipline. In terms of the training, imagine like your client is bloated and swollen and is having abdominal cramps. The ability to actually activate your deep inner core muscles is going to be affected, which means you're more prone to injury, which means you're not going to be as efficient lifting anyway. So, things like that do need to be taken into consideration. And, you can, sometimes it means having an open and honest conversation with your trainer. A lot of people have trainers in Dubai. And deciding when is the best time for different training methods and things like that. So did I make that clear? Yeah.
Oh no, 100%. And you picked up that last point was something that I was going to pick up on, and I was going to say, yeah, it's kind of like, especially for like a male trainer as well, it's kind of a conversation that's probably never really had. But the way that you laid out the foundations of everything there, it's actually an easy conversation. It doesn't mean that you have to. It's almost just letting people know in terms of your coach, maybe it's your partner, those types of things. I'm not saying you have to go and broadcast it over social media, but just having that honest conversation to go, hey, do you mind if we tone things down for the next 3 or 4 days? Or, can we, I'm feeling good. Do you think we can use this time to, max out my squat or something like that? And I guess it's just having that, sharing that knowledge that you have with the person who's there trying to help you as well, because ultimately that's what they're there to do. And I would hate the thought of me trying to push someone when the time isn't right for them, and then, like you said, it leads to injury, or even worse, it leads to like a breakdown of trust.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as a trainer, just being aware of when the menstrual period is. I mean, it is an emotional time for a woman. We have all sorts of mood swings. We hijacked by hormones. So, you can, as a trainer, you can be more encouraging and a little bit more compassionate, as well. Because, I mean, for me personally, I gain 4 to 5 pounds during my menstrual period. So, but I am aware of that. But that could affect my confidence and be, really discouraging. But being aware of that is half the battle. So, I have my preferred clothes that I like to wear during that time, my high-waisted black leggings kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, I mean, in the past, I've done 10 physique competitions. So, I've scheduled photo shoots around my menstrual period. I feel the leanest after it. And, that's a great time for me. I feel absolutely awesome. But, it's different for each woman, and each cycle is different, but keeping tabs on it and it teaches you to be more bodily aware and more emotionally aware as well, so that you can work with yourself and, learn what works for you in the long term.
I think you've answered that really well. And I think, I know who it is, so I'll follow up, but I'm sure she got the answers that she was looking for there. So that was awesome. I'm going to wrap it up here. Rhian, I think there's a whole podcast to be done on nutrition through pregnancy and, breastfeeding and that type of stuff as well. So I think we can open this up to maybe a part 2 or to another conversation if you would be up for it. But we'll leave it there today. Where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram. So Rhian_Adams_athlete. And there are plenty of pregnancy and postpartum blogs on my website, along with a 12-week baby and me plan. So working out with your baby. My website is www.rhianadams.forlife.co.uk. And there's plenty of information on there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely go and check that out. And I'll tag you in the show notes as well. And this one will be out very soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.